enough people want to know. I can assure you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Grantaran Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Nitai Gaur Prema Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're going to read from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 13. Chapter 2, text 13. Very famous verse. Well, they're all famous, of course. But this one is quoted extensively by Srila Prabhupada. And although on some levels it may be considered a very basic verse, which pretty much at this stage in our devotional lives we're all very much aware of, still, it's not a bad thing to remind ourselves occasionally of what the purport of this verse is, and to take stock of it and try to put it into practice in our daily devotional lives. So if you bear with me, all elevated souls here, great pandits, many wonderful people I've met in the last few days. I've been reminded, I'm meeting the grandchildren of some of the major personalities I used to work with in Mombasa nearly 40 years ago. So it's been a wonderful experience, but it's also a reminder to me that I'm no longer 30 years old. Because now I'm meeting the grandchildren of people that I engaged with in devotional service in the Ganjoni temple, who were my age at the time when we were working together. And now I'm their grandfather's age. So I think this verse is appropriate. So if we could kindly bear with me, we'll have a look at this verse. We'll go through it step by step. And let's see what we can churn. Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Taha dehantara praptir Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komanam yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komanam yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati
Dehi nosmin yatha dehi
Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati. Ladies, Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehi nosmin yatha dehi Komaram yovanam jara Tata dehantara prapti Dhirastatra yamuyati Dehina of the embodied has been in this Yatha as Dehi in the body Komaram boyhood Yovanam youth Jara old age Tata similarly Dehan Antara of transference of the body Prapti achievement Dhira sober Tatra thereupon Na never Muyati is deluded. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Please repeat. as the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport by His Divine Grace, D.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual spirit soul is there. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's life, work and life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So in either case, there was no cause for lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained, on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable, against the principle of the supreme souls being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatana, and are called jara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into the material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so, and even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same, fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present at each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun and the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then their relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy, Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless, because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in positions to the living entity, Arjuna, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master forced open my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So as we said earlier, this is a very basic verse describing, basically, we're not the body, we're spirit soul. It's like I mentioned earlier on, I've met so many people in the last few days who reminded me of the fact that I'm no longer a 25 or a 30-year-old, which is the age I was when I first arrived in Kenya. I was a very young brahmachari, dressed in saffron, very much enthusiastic to change the world in 7 days. And I think the world changed me in the last few decades, rather than me changing the world. But it has been quite a journey. But that journey is almost imperceptible. Practically speaking, we can't even measure it. I look back on those last 70 odd years of my life, and I'm still the same person. The same person that was nourished by my mother's breast, the same person that went to school for the first day, the same person who became a teenager, who became a youth, who then became a 30, 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old. I'm the same person. But yet, we are told when we go to school, we do biology, we study science in school, particularly when we start senior education, we're reminded of the fact that every 7 years, every single molecule in the body changes. Every single molecule. Like I need to shave my head now, so I'm going to shave in the next few days, and I'm reminded that when the hair is shaved off the body, that same hair will grow again. I need to trim my nails, I take a shower every day, I'm washing so many particles off my body. So imperceptibly, every single atom in the body changes over a period of 7 years. So here I am, 73 years old. So that means I've changed my body 10 times in the last lifetime. But I'm still the same person. So what is it that is the same? That essence is the spirit soul. And that essence, we never even realize who we are until we're very, very fortunate to come in touch with a philosophy like the philosophy presented to us by Srila Prabhupada, the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which brings us to the stage of actually understanding who we are. Like we have a little competition. Around the world, of course, the biggest seller for Iskcon is the Bhagavad Gita. And it has been translated into so many languages, including this man's language in Arabic. And we've sold hundreds of thousands of copies of Bhagavad Gita in Arabic in Muslim countries. My very, very good friend, the late Vidhur Das Prabhuji, he was distributing Bhagavad Gitas in Arabic in Lebanon, in the Middle East, in all the countries of the Middle East. He was arrested by Hezbollah. He was kept in a cell for days, underground, without light, without water, completely submerged in darkness for days and days and days on end. And he was finally released. But he was distributing Bhagavad Gita in Arabic countries when it was dangerous to do so, when there were wars going on, when cities and towns were being destroyed. So the Bhagavad Gita is sold all over the world. But what the second biggest seller we have in the world is the science of self-realization, which has also been translated into so many languages. And another one, which is a big one, is the journey of self-discovery. This has also been translated in so many languages. I was living in Heidelberg in the German temple for a number of years, and we distributed Bhagavad Gitas in German. I lived in the Paris temple, we distributed Bhagavad Gitas in French. I lived in America, I lived in the Washington DC temple, we distributed Bhagavad Gitas. But the biggest seller, apart from Bhagavad Gita, is the Science of Self-Realization, which is a series of conversations between Srila Prabhupada and famous personalities at the time. There was one time Srila Prabhupada was traveling on a plane to Chicago from Los Angeles, and of course in those days on Pan Am particularly, they used to give out free Time and Newsweek magazine to every passenger. So Prabhupada was glancing at the headline, and on the headline it said, "Crime, Why and What to Do." And this is a chapter in the Science of Self-Realization. So when Prabhupada landed in Chicago, of course the devotees were there to greet him, and coincidentally, one of the programs that was arranged for Srila Prabhupada, one of the people he was arranged to meet, the devotees would always make arrangements for famous personalities to meet Srila Prabhupada. Professors and teachers and politicians, and they would arrange for him to be interviewed in TV studios and radios and so on and so forth. Poets, philosophers, artists, so many famous personalities met Srila Prabhupada, and he would preach to everyone equally. One of the people that was arranged for Srila Prabhupada to meet on that particular trip to Chicago was the head of the Chicago police. And Prabhupada was just reading in Time magazine, the state of crime in the United States in the 70s was rampant. So the Time magazine were proposing the idea, crime. Why is crime there? And what do we do about it? So Prabhupada met with the head of the Chicago police, and he presented the philosophy of how we can solve crime. And that is a chapter in the Science of Self-Realization, which everyone should read. And the basic tenet that Prabhupada was enunciating in that particular chapter, in that interview with the head of the Chicago police, was, we're not the body, we're spirit and soul. And he quoted this verse, this very verse. And if we analyze all the problems of the world, what is going on with the world, all the wars, from the First World War, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, this war, that war, the other war, it's all based on this misconception that I am the body, not understanding that I'm spirit soul. As Prabhupada used to explain, in the war, in the Second World War in particular, which Prabhupada experienced, he was living in Bengal at the time, which was under British control, and Churchill, Prabhupada considered him to be a demon. He withdrew all the grain from Bengal at the time, and he distributed it amongst the armies, because the armies needed food. Napoleon said, an army marches on its stomach. So they increased the price of food all over the country, and Bengal suffered the most. There was a massive famine. Millions of people died. Millions of people died because they artificially increased the price of food, so the government could hoard the food, and then people couldn't afford to buy the food, rice and wheat and grains, so people died. And this was an artificial, that was done by the British, just 2 years before they gave independence to India. Simply based on the bodily concept of life. Prabhupada explained that when the women in England are going to the church to pray, to bring their husband and their son and their father back home safe from the war, then they're praying sincerely. But then the German women, they're going to the church to pray, bring their husband and their son and their father back safe from the war. So God is confused. God doesn't know what to do when he's prayed like this. No. It's nothing to do with God. Going to the church to pray for your country to be safe and for your soldiers to be safe, just like it's going on in Russia and Ukraine right now. We have Ukrainian devotees in Nairobi. We have Russian devotees in Nairobi, and they're all serving very nicely, without any problem. Because they're not of the bodily concept. You don't see the Russian devotee in Nairobi and the Ukrainian devotees in Nairobi battling it out on the altar with beating each other up. Because they understand, they're not the body. What is the point of all this? So it all boils down to this Komaran. That we're simply obsessed with this idea that I am the body, and this is mine, and it belongs to me, and I'm going to kill you. I've given the example so many times in my own country, where everyone is white, everyone is Irish, everyone is Christian, and we kill each other. Because one is a Catholic and the other is a Protestant. Again, this misconception. They're both the same religion. They're both the same nationality. They're both the same color skin. And we kill each other. To the recent point where I'm coming from a Catholic background, very, very staunch, pious Catholic family. But I lived on the border of the north and the south of Ireland, and I drove to work every day into the north of Ireland from the south. At the end of our village was the border, manned by machine guns, manned by the British Army. And if your car backfired, you were dead. They'd just shoot you, because they couldn't tell the difference between a backfire car and a machine gun. So everyone's car was tuned to perfection. The mechanics made a lot of money, making sure everybody's car was running very smoothly. There's no such thing as matatu. So, what happens? Then you cross the border and then you're completely in a different country with different rules, different immigration, different customs. Prabhupada used to decry this immigration. So they're like barking dogs. Everywhere you go, barking dogs. Woof, woof, woof. Why are you coming here? But you know the saying, the dogs may bark, but the caravan passes. So in our life, if Jai, Shri Rukmini Dwarfati, Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Jai. In our life, if we become obsessed with this bodily idea, this bodily identification, then it just stops us from understanding who we are. Understanding that I'm the soul, I'm part and parcel of the Supreme, I'm eternal. I don't belong in this body. This is not me. This is just a covering. That's probably just the example when you hold up the glove and you put the hand inside the glove and you move the fingers so the glove appears to have life. But the glove has no life. The glove appears to be moving because the fingers are moving it. So if we water the root of the tree, we water the root, which is Krishna, then everything else falls into place. We got a tour of the garden today. We saw so many trees in the garden. We went out for lunch. And this very basic idea just comes home. If you water the root, try to water each individual leaf, each individual branch, it's a waste of time. You pour the water on the root of the tree. And in this way we can discover who we are. If we don't discover who we are, the journey of self-discovery, the science of self-realization, if I don't understand who I am, if I'm still convinced that I'm the body, then what hope is there for understanding Krishna? There's none. So I'm not Punjabi, I'm not Gujarati, I'm not Irish, I'm not German, I'm not American, I'm not Indian, I'm none of these things. I'm not Hindu, I'm not Christian, I'm not Jew, I'm not Muslim, I'm not Sikh. None of these things apply to the soul. So this is a very basic philosophy. It's not that we want to be insulting anybody by reminding ourselves of what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. I am spirit soul, I'm part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So, as long as we follow this basic instruction, then we're on the path to Krishna consciousness. As soon as we try to imagine that we're something, I mean, of course we get emotional whenever whenever Ireland are playing in some international tournament or some sport, of course I support Ireland. I wave the flag, but it's all done in jest. It's not that I'm going to go out and kill somebody because they don't like Ireland. Or I expect somebody to kill me because they don't like Ireland. I mean, it's just a nonsense idea. And yet the whole world is functioning on this misconception that I am the body. Just like Prabhupada gives the example, when the white man, particularly the British, when they so-called discovered America, you never hear of anybody being mentioned who discovered the Thames River or discovered the Danube. There's nobody mentioned who's discovered, but there's always a discoverer who discovered the source of the Nile, or discovered the Zambezi, or discovered the Congo. Those countries were discovered, but no country in Europe was ever discovered. So all these countries that were so-called discovered, they were populated by people. People lived there for thousands, millions of years. But then suddenly Columbus discovered America. And before Columbus discovered America, it didn't exist. Even though millions of people were living there. So Prabhupada used to say that, and particularly he mentioned this in Melbourne in Australia. The Aborigines, they're the original inhabitants. The Indians in North America are the original inhabitants. So they were there long before the Mzungu came along. But yet the Mzungu claims it as his. Not only did the Mzungu claim this land as his, he killed all the people who were already there. Thinking that, no, this is mine. It belongs to me more than anybody else because I have the Bible. I'm a follower of Jesus. Again, another misconception. And they claim that Jesus is God. Jesus is Lord. You see it on posters all over Kenya. Jesus is Lord. Follow Jesus. And Jesus himself said, I'm not God. Do not adore me. Adore the one who sent me. He left the prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. Our Father. But they say, no, Jesus is God. Jesus himself says, I'm not God. They don't believe him. No. They put him on a pedestal, which he's not. He's a Shaktivation avatar. He's an empowered incarnation, undoubtedly. But he's not God, as he himself claims. So again, another misconception, and the whole religion is based on this foundation. This misconception. And all the religions are all the same. Because they don't follow Bhagavad Gita. And even those who claim they follow Bhagavad Gita, they don't follow Bhagavad Gita as it is. They put their own interpretation. As Prabhupada is mentioning here, the Mayavadis, they also hold the Bhagavad Gita. But then they say that Krishna is the unborn within Krishna. The unborn within. They make it so complicated. So that, practically speaking, nobody can appreciate or even understand what anybody is talking about. But if we just get down to this very basic point, I'm a spirit soul, Krishna is spiritual, I'm a part and parcel of him, I'm a microscopic part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with the same qualities, but just not the same in quantity. And from there, it's very, very easy to reach the stage of actually engaging in spirituality. But if we don't go on with the bodily concept of life, we can never reach that stage. So this is the first step in God realization. The very first step is to understand I'm not the body. And everything else falls into place. Everything. Prabhupada says in the 4th chapter, verse 34, that the path to spiritual realization is undoubtedly difficult. It is difficult. Nobody says that it's easy, because we've been indoctrinated to believe that I am this body. But Once we get past this misconception and we begin on the path of Krishna consciousness, from then on it's very, very easy. We just make it complicated, unnecessarily. And how do we do that? We approach a spiritual master. By approaching a spiritual master, render service unto him. He can give you knowledge. Because what? Why? He has seen the truth. The Tattva Darshan. So when we're touched by this person who has seen the truth, who has the Darshan of the Lord, then of course he can give that to others. Prabhupada changed the lives of thousands of people. He traveled the globe 14 times. 14 times. As an old man. So-called old man. He left Vrindavan when he was almost 70 years old. Then he began his spiritual mission on behalf of his spiritual master. He was given the instruction in 1922. In 1922. And in 1944 he started Back to Godhead magazine. In the middle of the war. When no paper was available. Prabhupada had to go around even begging for paper to print the Back to Godhead magazine. In 1955 he started the League of Devotees. In 1966 he started Iskcon, and in 1977 he left us. So one man in Bombay, he noticed that every 11 years something was happening, major was happening in Srila Prabhupada's life. So he said to Srila Prabhupada, I noticed that 1922 this happened, 1933 this happened, 1944 this happened, 1955, 1960. Will something happen in 1977? Prabhupada said, maybe. It's mystical. It's mystical. Everything is mystical. Prabhupada was asked, Vivekananda and Ramakrishna, they performed so many miracles. He was challenged in Bombay. Sorry, Mumbai. You know, our great saintly, great Indian saints, they performed so many miracles. Vivekananda went to the West, he went to Chicago, he did this, he did that, Ramakrishna did this, did that, and the other. They performed so many miracles. All the great saints, all the great personalities, they performed wonderful miracles. What miracle have you performed? And sitting in front of him was hundreds of his disciples in the temple in Juhu. Hundreds. All with shaved head, tilak, chanting, dancing. Prabhupada said, look around you. All these boys and girls, they were engaged in breaking all the four principles, engaged in all kinds of sinful activities. Smoking, drinking, fornicating, doing this, taking drugs, hippies, roaming around on the street, nothing to do, nowhere to go. I went to the lowest part of New York, the worst slum in New York, the Bowery, and I collected them up in the hundreds. And I sent some of them to London. They started the temple, they met the Beatles, and then everything just went wild from there. And suddenly, Hare Krishna was a household name all over the world. They gave up all these sinful activities and they dedicated their lives to Krishna. And they dedicated their lives to serving me. On behalf of my spiritual master, I can only imagine that my spiritual master has sent them to assist me in my mission. Is this not a miracle? We know what it's like to build this temple. To build this temple was a huge endeavor. It's not a joke. And look at this magnificent building that we have here now. There's a great dedication to the service of the Lord. This is just one temple. Prabhupada opened 108 temples around the world. Not only that, he translated these books night and day. He would rise at midnight. At midnight. He would sleep for 2 or 3 hours a day. write thousands of letters to his disciples all over the world, managing the society. No internet, no mobile phones. And he circled the globe 14 times. And wherever Prabhupada landed, if he landed in Australia, he landed in Los Angeles, he landed in London, or Paris, or wherever he was going, immediately he would start his day as if the local time applied to him at all times. He never suffered from jet lag. It takes me days to recover from a long distance flight. Prabhupada was traveling non-stop. Is this not a miracle? Look at what he achieved. Prabhupada was here in Mombasa. He spent 6 weeks in Mombasa, lecturing in the Hindu Union Temple. He said that this part of the world is like a small drop of Swargaloka. This is a wonderful country. And Prabhupada traveled everywhere. Whether it was a wonderful country, whether it was a hellish zone, he went to Moscow, he went to Russia. He lectured in Moscow. At the time when it was the Cold War, the head of the Soviet Union was running the Eastern Bloc. Prabhupada went there. He made one disciple. One. And from there are tens of thousands of Russian devotees with hundreds and hundreds of temples all over the Russian Federation today. 300,000 initiated devotees in Russia from one. And that one, Ananta Shastri, he hardly spoke English. But Prabhupada had a translator and he spoke to him for 3 days and instructed him. Is that not a miracle? 300,000 initiated devotees.
More than 300 centers.
Can you imagine? And that's outside of India. That's in the former Soviet Union. There are hundreds of temples in Ukraine, Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Poland. Massive, massive numbers of devotees coming to the festivals all over these Eastern Bloc countries that were formerly completely off limits to the West. I remember one time actually the first time I was coming to Nairobi, I came through Moscow on Aeroflot. And one devotee was passing through London Temple. And we were sitting taking breakfast. He was on his way to Canada, and he had just brought a black-body devotees from Nairobi to London. And in order to get them into London, he had to have a return ticket, or they wouldn't let him in. He was bringing that devotee to Canada. So of course the return ticket, he was going to throw it in the bin. So we were taking breakfast together. He was the regional secretary for East Africa. Rochan is his name, Prabhupada disciple. So we're just sitting there taking breakfast. I was running the Soho Street restaurant at the time, which was not called Govinda's, it was called Healthy, Wealthy and Wise then. So I think that was 79 or 80. So he said, hey Vidhur, have you ever been to Africa? I said, no. Would you like to go? I said, I don't know, never thought about it. He said, well, here's a ticket. So, so I looked at this ticket, and it was the name of this African devotee who he had to use that ticket to get him into London. So Mr. Wagadugu or whatever his name was, I forget his name. So I said, oh, okay. So a few weeks later, I was just completely in Maya. So after Mangalarti, I sneaked out the door of the temple and went to Heathrow Airport, got on the plane, the Aeroflot. In those days, there was no security. You didn't have to check in with your passport and all that kind of stuff. So I had that.
I hope it has not.
Is it okay?
It's still live. It's live.
You got your...
This 1 minute.
Jack.
No, it's not. Oh, it was good 1 minute.
Allahu Akbar.
Yeah, let's go in.